Good morning, everyone. My name is Olga Rodriguez, and I'm a research fellow at the Higher Education Center with the Public Policy Institute of California. I would like to welcome and thank you for joining us for today's program. PPIC has just released a report titled The New Era of Student Access at California's Community Colleges. And today's presentation is intended to highlight a few of these findings. The full report, the technical appendices, as well as the slides from today's presentation are all available on our website at ppic.org. We'd like to thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the College Futures Foundation, the ECMC Foundation, the Evelyn and Walter Haas Jr. Fund, as well as the Sutton Family Fund for their support of the research and today's virtual event. So for today's program, I'll walk you through some of the main findings for the report to set the stage for our panel. I'll then invite my colleague and co-author Marisol Cuellar Mejia to moderate a discussion with our esteemed panelists about how to further advance student success and equity in the AB 705 era. And finally, we'll have some time for audience question and answer. If you have a question for our panelists, please send that to the email address on the screen, ppiceventquestions@gmail.com. We would also appreciate if you could please include your name and organization along with your question. And with that, I'll begin my presentation. Great. So before I get started, the research I'm presenting here today is joint work with my colleagues Marisol Cuellar Mejia and Hans Johnson. We'd also like to thank Mina Dadgar for her expertise and contributions during the research interviews. Also, many thanks to Ronnie Brooks and Chidi Agu for their excellent research support. Also, before I get started, I want to say especially a big thank you to the community college system partners. This research would not be possible if it were not for the student level data provided by the Chancellor's office. We're also extremely grateful for the valuable insights provided by community college faculty, staff, and administrators during our research interviews. So I'll begin by providing a little bit of background. As some of you already know, until very recently, the vast majority of students coming into California's community colleges were deemed not college ready and referred to one or more levels of remedial reading and writing and math courses. However, for the last 10 years, research showed that traditional remedial sequences were not very effective and that most students actually dropped out of the sequence and never completed the transfer level math course and English course they needed for their degree or transfer. And so this evidence on the poor outcomes of remediation also intersected with a growing evidence that actually questioned the validity and accuracy of the placement tests that were used to determine college readiness, as well as with research that found that high school records were actually better predictors of student success in the college math and English courses. So informed by this growing evidence base, the adoption of AB 705 in 2016-2017 provides an excellent example of how data, research, and policy change can come in to dramatically transform placement and remediation. And this law specifically mandates that California community colleges maximize the probability that a student will come in and complete the transfer level coursework in math and English within 1 year. And it also requires that colleges use high school records such as GPA and prior coursework as a primary criteria for placement. So our new report aims to shed light on how the implementation of AB 705 affected student access, outcomes, and racial equity by specifically looking at the fall of 2019, which was the deadline for AB 705 implementation. And so to do this, we draw on 3 main data sources, including student longitudinal data provided by the Chancellor's office to examine access, outcomes, and equity in transfer level English and math courses at 114 colleges in the system. We also draw on a comprehensive scan of college documents and websites, including the college's AB 705 implementation plans, to identify the placement policies and co-requisite offerings that were in place in fall 2019. To supplement this and to better understand the implementation process, we also conducted 38 interviews with college faculty, staff, and administrators. And I want to mention that this report provides a descriptive analysis of what was happening during the first semester of full implementation of AB 705, and it's intended to set the stage for a forthcoming PPIC study, which will examine which will use causal research methods to identify the impact of AB 705 during the first year of implementation. So here we have our first finding, and this figure uses the data for all 114 community colleges in the system to show how access to the transfer level courses changed over time. Here we use enrollment as our measure of access because it is precisely a direct consequence of a college's placement methods. And so each set of bars here represents first-time math and English students in the fall of each year, which enrolled directly in the transfer level math and English course. And just to give you a sense of our cohort sample sizes, on average, the denominator in the orange bars represents over 160,000 first-time English students. The denominator in the green bars represents, on average, over 150,000 first-time math students. And so here, this figure clearly illustrates just how just a few years ago, hundreds of thousands of students were not accessing the transfer level math and English courses as their first course. And during this time frame, colleges, for the most part, were relying on standardized placement tests to determine college readiness. And as I noted, the vast majority of students were starting in these lengthy remedial sequences. However, from 2016 on, we begin to see this slow and steady increase in access to the transfer level English courses. And this is consistent with the availability of the basic skills student outcomes transformation grants, as well as the early implementation of multiple measures and co-requisite reforms. However, it was not until the fall of 2019, which was the deadline for AB 705 implementation, that we see this pace of change accelerate dramatically, especially in math. In that term, we see that the first-time math students who began in the transfer level math course more than doubled in just 1 year, and nearly quadrupled if we compare this to where the system was in 2015. In English, now access to college composition is nearly universal, with 96% of students starting directly in a college comp as their first English course. So next, when we take a look at how different racial and ethnic groups fared in this figure, we see that in large part due to this transformational law, we're actually seeing that the system has made remarkable progress towards eradicating these long-standing racial and ethnic inequities in access to the transfer level math and English courses. Specifically, when we compare fall 2015 to fall 2019, we see that the access gap for English between white and Latino students narrowed from 24 percentage points to just 1 percentage point. When we compare white and African American students, we see that this gap narrowed from 31 percentage points to just 4 percentage points in fall 2019. And so what we also see when we look at the proportionality index is that now all groups are equally represented in college composition compared to their share in the student population in English. In math, we see a similar story where the gaps in access to the transfer level math, direct access to transfer level math has significantly narrowed. The white Latino gap went from 12 percentage points in 2015 to just 4 percentage points in 2019. For the gaps between white and African Americans narrowed from 15 to 8 percentage points. Here too, we see that for the most part, all groups made significant gains, and all groups are now, except for African Americans, are now equally represented with respect to their share. And so it's clear that more work is needed to ensure equitable access across the system for African American students. So I want to pause here to just highlight that this is outstanding system-wide progress in just the span of a few years. However, these system averages do hide some important institutional variation. Specifically, in the fall of 2019, we found that there's still a group of about 20 colleges where a considerable number of students started in remediation, and where access to the transfer level courses for historically underrepresented students continued to be inequitable relative to their share of the student population, especially in math, where the college with the lowest access level to the transfer level math course actually still enrolls over half of their students in remedial math. And so our research finds that the way colleges structure their placement policies and course sequences may actually be contributing to these higher enrollment in remedial courses, as well as these lingering inequities. For example, we find that higher remediation rates and inequities are more likely to happen when colleges use stricter placement rules, such as setting higher GPA thresholds when compared to the default placement rules. We also see that when colleges require remediation versus having it be optional, we find higher remediation and inequities. Interestingly, we also see that when counselors are used to gather the multiple measures placement data versus automating the process also results in higher remediation rates. Also, when colleges use sample readings, writings, and math problems as part of their guided self-placement, we also saw higher remediation rates. Still, while this data shows that more work is necessary in order to ensure that an equitable assessment and placement process, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this group of colleges, which in 2019 had among the highest remediation rates, would be considered successes if we compared it to where we were just a few years ago. In fact, in 2019, their remediation rates actually at this set of colleges is 2 to 3 times lower than the state average was in 2015. So as you all know, access is only half of the story. So given the scale of the change we're seeing, it's also critical to examine the outcomes of students once they get to the transfer level math and English courses. And so for this, we examined math and English throughput rates, which is a proportion of the first-time math and English students who successfully complete a transfer level course with a C or better within a given time frame. Here we find that the one-term throughput rates increased significantly in the fall of 2019. In math, we see an almost 3 times more students complete this important milestone compared to fall 2015. And this resulted in over 31,000 more students completing this critical milestone in fall 2019 compared to where we were in fall 2015. In English, successful completions of college composition more than doubled between 2015 and 2019. And this translates to over 57,000 more students completing this milestone in 2019. Notably, when we disaggregate the data by race ethnicity, we find that in fall 2019, Latino and African American students experienced throughput rates that were 3 to 4 times higher compared to where they were in 2015. However, it's also clear that the racial and ethnic gaps have not gone away. So taken together, the data that I just presented is telling us that many more students are starting directly in the transfer level courses, and that given the opportunity, many more students will be successful in these courses. However, it's also making it very painfully clear that students who struggle in this new policy landscape are now more visible than ever. In fact, one of the important outcomes that we believe came out of AB 705 is that faculty, staff, and administrators are now asking about this group of students. Sadly, under the old system, the group of students who did not make it into and through the transfer level math and English courses often slipped away unnoticed. And so the question now becomes, what do faculty, staff, and administrators need to do to help ensure this group of students succeeds? And so at this point, we see that a group of faculty, staff, and administrators interrogates the classroom and campus policies and practices to examine whether they are supporting or hindering student success. There's also a group who believes that this group actually did need traditional remediation. And so here, in this figure, we see that traditional remediation is not necessarily the answer. In fact, one way that colleges across the system stepped up to support students is by providing co-requisite remediation, where students receive the additional academic support while enrolled in the transfer level course. And so in this figure, we see that students in co-requisite models are much more likely to complete a transfer level course within 1 term than students who start in traditional remediation and are given 2 terms or 1 year in English, or 3 terms, or fall to fall in statistics and algebra math pathways. And so importantly, another thing I want to know is that while we find that compared to the standard college composition courses, co-requisite models actually also had higher shares of Latino and African American students. And the good thing is that Latino and African American students are actually more equitably represented in the successful completions of college composition when they start in a co-requisite model. We find that this is true in SLAM as well, but more is needed to ensure that Latinos and African Americans are equitably represented in the successful completions of BSTEM. And as with our previous findings, here too we find some lingering racial ethnic gaps. Still, I cannot emphasize enough how impressive these gains are, despite the fact that more work is needed to eliminate the remaining racial equity gaps. The fact that the throughput rates are 2 to 5 times higher in co-requisite courses tells us that future efforts should focus on ensuring co-requisite courses are designed and taught with equity in mind. So here we provide a set of recommendations derived from the research to help inform the discussions moving forward. And the first is to ensure placement methods broaden rather than limit access. First, given that there are findings that disparate impacts between students who start in remedial courses versus transfer level courses with or without support, it's clear that this placement process is a high stakes decision. So we recommend that colleges closely examine their placement policies to ensure that they help improve access and equity. Our findings also suggest that colleges could do more to encourage placement in core requisites. Along with this, colleges should also increase core requisite offerings to ensure that everyone who could benefit from these courses is able to access them. And as we found with all of our outcomes, in prioritizing closing equity gaps will be critical. Moving forward, college administrators, faculty, counselors, and researchers will need to work together to identify what is driving these persisting gaps and how to address them. And importantly, we feel that the time is ripe, especially now, given that the pandemic and the racial justice movement that has emerged over the last year means that there's a genuine interest in examining how bias and structural inequities affect student outcomes. And so the great thing is that we're starting to learn of colleges across the state who are already making progress on this front, and partly supported by the Chancellor's office and their call to action. We also recommend that colleges get a better understanding of students' needs. And this is especially important given that more students are enrolling directly in Gateway Math and English courses. And so, and they're coming in with a diverse set of backgrounds and varying levels of academic preparation. So faculty, counselors, and advisors will need to play a proactive role in ensuring that students are connected with other academic and non-academic supports, such as tutoring, food pantries, and mental health services, and all which are becoming much more prominent with the COVID-19 pandemic. So finally, the dramatic changes brought about by AB 705 give colleges an opportunity to reimagine and improve students' early colleges experiences with equity in mind. So moving forward, colleges will need to use data, research to fine-tune their placement policies, their course offerings, and support services in order to ensure that students have the best chance to achieve their goals. And so with initiatives like guided pathways also being implemented at colleges across the state, this provides an especially powerful opportunity to ensure that there's alignment across these initiatives to ensure that students have the opportunities and supports they need in college and beyond. And so this concludes my presentation. I want to remind everyone to please submit your questions to PPIC eventquestions@gmail.com. Like I said, we'll be responding to audience question and answer after the panel discussion. And with that, I'll hand it over to my colleague Marisol, who will moderate today's discussion with our esteemed panel of experts. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga, for an excellent presentation, and good morning, everyone. You know, I would like to remind you that this was just a little taste of our research. In the report, you will find more detailed information. We have a great panel today. I'm excited to get started. In the interest of time, we will be keeping introductions brief. All of our panelists today bring a unique perspective on the topic from where they sit in the California Community College system. Without further ado, let me welcome our panelists. First, we have Aisha Lowe. She is the Vice Chancellor of Educational Services at the California Community College Chancellor's Office.
Good morning.
Hello, Aisha. Next, we have Virginia May. She's a professor of mathematics at Sacramento City College and the Vice President of the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. Welcome, Virginia.
Good morning.
Good morning. And finally, we have Myra Snell. She is a professor of mathematics at Los Medanos College and the co-founder of the California Acceleration Project. Welcome, Myra.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
And thank you so much for being here with us today to discuss this important topic. I would like to start by commending each one of you for the tremendous amount of work that each one of you and all the community college in the system have endured to implement the mandates of AB 705. It was not a small undertaking. However, we think that these early results should be very rewarding. As we saw in Olga's presentation, AB 705 led to substantial gains in access to gateway courses on a scale that we had never seen before, and that would have been difficult to imagine just 3 or 4 years ago. Moreover, the community college system made great strides in eliminating long-standing inequities in access, as historically underrepresented students saw dramatic gains. Expand access coupled with a reform to student support help more students to complete these gateway courses, a key milestone in transferring to a 4-year college. And importantly, students in all racial and ethnic groups are completing these courses at substantially higher rates. With this in mind, I would like to start by asking each one of you to reflect on these amazing results. Let me start with Myra, because you and the California Acceleration Project have played a key role in helping these changes move forward.
Thank you, Marisol. I also wanted to thank Olga and Hans for the amazing amount of work on this very thorough and impressive report. And I want to again acknowledge the tremendous amount of work done by colleges and the Chancellor's office to implement AB 705. The payoff, as we just heard, for students has been absolutely remarkable and unprecedented. If I had come to you 4 years ago and said, there is a set of reforms that will nearly quadruple completion of transfer level math for Black and Latinx students, would you have done everything in your power to implement these reforms? Well, this is what AB 705 reforms have accomplished to date. And these reforms have produced the largest relative gains for Black and Latinx students. These groups now complete transfer level math and English at rates that exceed white completion 4 years ago. But large completion gaps remain, and this is obviously unacceptable. Now, you might be thinking that, well, there are other factors that could be explaining the lower completion rates for Black and Latinx students, such as the socioeconomic status of a college's community or perceived levels of student preparation. And these factors are beyond a college's control. But PPIC also found in their report that a very large proportion of the variation in completion gains across colleges in both math and English is explained by something completely within a college's control. And that is the degree to which a college increased the enrollment of students into transfer level coursework. And they showed, as we just heard, that support provided concurrently instead of through extra semesters of remediation improves completion. Now, in the next few weeks, the California Acceleration Project and public advocates are jointly publishing a report called Still Getting There, which is an analysis of the second year of AB 705 implementation through the lens of the fall 2020 class schedules. Just as budgets are a statement of values, course schedules are a statement about what colleges believe students should take. And in examining the fall 2020 schedules, it's clear that most colleges continue to operate from a belief that a lot of students don't belong in transfer level math. 62 colleges continue to dedicate 20% or more of introductory math sections to remediation, and 30 colleges offer more remedial sections than co-requisite sections. And guess what? We found that a larger proportion of Black and Latinx students attend colleges with large remedial offerings. Predictably, PPIC found that these students were also the least likely to enroll in transfer level math and the least likely to complete it. Okay, now for your homework. Go to the technical appendix of this report and look up your college's completion rate in math, and look at the indices that tell you if Black and Latinx students are equitably represented in transfer level completion. Celebrate the progress that you see there, then open up your class schedule. Many of us are at colleges that still have work to do to fully and equitably implement the powerful reforms driven by AB 705.
Thank you, Myra. And Aisha, what these amazing results mean for the students and for the system from your perspective?
Yes, thank you, and good morning, everyone. So I was very excited to see this report and the results of this report. I believe that this report shows us that when given the opportunity, our students, all of our students, are more than capable of excelling. And so these results, I believe, really do demonstrate the efficacy of the AB 705 reform, which forced us to confront an unfounded practice of testing and sorting students. A practice that is frankly based in a eugenics history that is fundamentally racist. And I'm glad to see the results helping us to confront that and helping us to confront this history and this ideology that some students can learn at certain levels and others cannot. These practices of using assessments to sort and track students where ultimately the students lose. So I'm excited for what the report is showing us, the ways in which AB 705 did force us to change those practices. But I think the results of this report also require us to continue to confront any vestiges of those biased ideologies. And I hope that the results of this report inspire us to work to close the remaining gaps in effective implementation. What we need to truly achieve not just equitable placement, but equitable outcomes is an educational philosophy that all students can learn at any level and all students can achieve high academic outcomes. So that sort of shift in our beliefs really helps us focus as educators on what we must do to ensure that our students can actualize the ability that we know that they have. And so as I look at this report, it gets me thinking about the work we still need to do, right? Very excited for the results and the progress we're seeing thus far, but there's still work to be done, even as Myra was just saying. So as I thought about the report, a number of questions came to mind. How might the process of teaching and learning look different if we truly believe every student is highly capable, and if we believe that their success is our responsibility? What policies, what procedures, what structures, what practices continue to support that eugenicist ideology, those racist ideologies? And what do we need to do to dismantle those and uproot those from our system? And what do we need to know and do differently to ensure that all students succeed? So we need to interrogate everything, our placement processes, our curricular practices, different forms of concurrent support, peer interaction, faculty and student interaction, classroom culture, and really investigate those best practices and invest in those best practices that ensure student success. So this report for me demonstrates that we are headed in the right direction, excited to see the positive results, but it also points to the important work that is still before us.
Thank you, Aisha. And now, Jeannie, how you and the Academic Senate reflect on these changes?
Thank you. So I'm following some great speakers here. So first of all, I would like to thank the excellent leadership and staff at the Public Policy Institute of California for reaching out to the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges to join in this conversation on these very important discussions regarding increasing access to high quality English and mathematics education, and moreover, closing the equity gaps of minoritized students. I am so glad we share the same goal of increasing student success and that we are all investing time in analysis. I think it is vital that we share our various perspectives. So a little bit about ASCCC. We represent the 59,000 faculty in the California community colleges through their local academic senates in all academic and professional matters, some of which include curriculum, establishing prerequisites, and now co-requisites. I would imagine that would be included, educational program development, standards or policies regarding student preparation and success, policies for faculty professional development, and processes for program review. The ASCCC supports colleges in establishing educational programs and processes that meet the needs of their local student populations and communities. So my initial reactions to the report is that I appreciate that students are at the center and the recognition that equity gaps persist. It was good to see that what was going to be 2 separate reports is now 1 report. Successful implementation of AB 705 must include broad analyses using many variables. It was my sense that regardless of one's personal opinion on how AB 705 is implemented, successful implementation was embraced by all. I do have concern that access may be conflated with enrollment, as many reading this report that are outside of the day-to-day college processes might not understand the difference. Along with the first-time English and mathematics students, there need to be analyses on all English and mathematics students as the programs implemented as a result of AB 705 affect all such students. That includes not only throughput analysis, but analysis on student success, retention, persistence, completion, and the implications of receiving substandard grade notations in transfer level coursework. So absolutely, access has increased and quite dramatically, as stated in the report. I don't think this comes as a surprise to anyone. One key term that needs clarification up front is access, which is really synonymous with placement. In this report, access is defined at the end of the report in the glossary of terms as enrollment, since the authors didn't have data on placement at the time. Course enrollment occurs after access or placement and is determined by the student. They choose the course or courses in which they will enroll. The college cannot force a student to enroll in any particular course. The college can prevent students from enrolling in some courses, and not offering the course is one way to prevent students from enrolling and limiting access. So this study is focused on first-time in English or mathematics students, important in a first step towards evaluating AB 705 implementation. Currently in the California Community College system, about 15% of the student population are first-time students overall. It is incumbent upon all of us that we not forget the other 85% of our students, as AB 705 does not distinguish between first-time English or mathematics students or other students. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeannie. And I'm going to take 30 seconds to respond to something. First, we are using enrollment because we believe that enrollment is really a manifestation of the placement policies in place. So that's telling you, what the placement policies look like in a college. That's one. Second, I completely agree. And I think in the reports on how we mentioned, there is a reason why we focus in first-time students is because we want to be able to identify the real effect pre and post-reform. However, I could argue that if we were to include continuing students, the impact that you will see will be much greater, because there were many students who were stuck in the remedial sequence that, we see that in the data, that they fail and persist and fail. And then the co-requisites came, took the class with the co-requisite, and they succeed. So that's one that, and I completely agree. And, what is so exciting about this for, policy makers, researchers, is that the work is not done. We are going to continue studying this. Our commitment with the community college system, it is real, and this is reflected in our agenda. But now I want to move on to our next question, which is, the three of you mentioned equity gaps. And of course, what we believe is that should be our main goal moving forward. We got rid of one of the main obstacles to student completion, which was completion of gateway courses. So now we can focus in making sure that we can get all the students in the same place. So my question is, building upon these impressive gains that we have seen so far from AB 705 implementation, what else can be done moving forward to support the quest for greater racial equity in successful completion of gateway math and English courses? And this time, let me start with Aisha.
Thank you for that question, Marisol. So a couple of things come to mind, and in particular, reflecting on AB 705 and the results of this report. So when we think about completion and we think about persistent racial equity gaps, we all understand that placement was only part of the equation, right? Giving students an opportunity to access the transfer level curriculum. But where completion lags and where racial equity gaps persist, that then becomes a matter of curriculum, of pedagogy, and of classroom culture, right? That's then about the ways in which we are supporting students through the learning journey. So as I reflect on it, I think there's a couple of important places for us to lean in as educators in this system. So one is classroom culture, right? How do we lean into creating classroom cultures of acceptance and of belonging, where all of our students feel welcomed and supported, where all of our students feel like they are in this reciprocal relationship with their fellow classmates and with their faculty that's about supporting their learning journey, as opposed to feeling that they're being judged, right? And the skills they are still developing are being judged. So I think classroom culture is one place where we need to lean in. Another place where we need to lean in is effective differentiation, right? The one size fits all model of education is antiquated and it is ineffective, right? I think history has clearly taught us at this point that approach to education does not work. So the process of teaching and learning has to evolve. It has to become more individualized toward the student need, which is what equity is. And we need to then support our faculty and give our faculty the professional development that they need to be able to differentiate well within the classroom. And then we also have to lean into really scaffolding the learning journey. As this report shows, we have to expand concurrent support, right, in its various forms and really research those various forms of concurrent support so we can identify which are most effective and really identify those best practices. And then I think, sort of hearkening to something that were said by my co-panelists earlier, we also, I would say for our system, we have to shift from a compliance mindset, right? There was a fair amount of resistance to this reform. Many of our colleges, I believe most of our colleges, are now celebrating the changes that this reform has created for our students and for our college outcomes, right? Which is important. This is about our students and their access, but this is also about college outcomes, which is important for us as a system and will become increasingly essential as the student-centered funding formula kicks in. But there are still some colleges who have not fully embraced this as the learning opportunity that it is, as the opportunity for innovation and improvement that it is. And so I think the other thing we're really going to have to do is just honestly self-reflect about the barriers to equity that continue to persist in our system, and to start to do the hard work of interrogating our own beliefs and practices, and then also making better connections across the system to learn from the colleges that are successfully dismantling these gaps, right? And reaching out to our colleagues to leverage the best practices that are being developed across our system.
Thank you, Aisha. And Jeannie, what do you think that is the role of the Academic Senate in supporting colleges in this important goal?
So we successfully stopped the underplacement of students. I'm not saying the Academic Senate has done this, but we as a system have successfully stopped the underplacement of students into remedial courses that could be successful in college and transfer level coursework, especially those students that successfully completed coursework in high school. They are no longer required to repeat coursework in college. So consider those 57,000 more students that passed English composition with a C or better in fall 2019 compared to fall 2015, and the approximate 31,000 that passed transfer level mathematics in the same timeline. Upon disaggregating the successful students, there is a large equity gap, larger than the past 5 years. Translated, that means, thankfully, barriers have been eliminated for many students that didn't have access prior to fall 2019. However, adjustments to the new structures, programs, processes to benefit those students that are still not meeting with success must be made now. And this is where the academic senates can come in, as much of this falls under their purview, so to speak. The data shows that more of the students not meeting with success are students of color, resulting from many reasons, such as socioeconomic status or limited access to quality educational programs, which really stem from deep-rooted societal issues that we are now addressing as a system. And the Academic Senate, along with the Chancellor's office, are really championing this effort to make some real systemic changes in our educational offerings and support for our students.
Thank you, Jeannie. And Myra, in your role as a faculty leader and also as an instructor, what do you think?
First of all, I want to say, Aisha, oh my, yes, yes, yes. But I also want to emphasize that we have not completely removed the structural barriers that are creating institutional racism in our state. Our study found that colleges serving larger Black student populations are 2.5 times as likely to have class schedules with a large proportion of remedial math. So we have to stay focused on clearing these structural barriers. But Aisha's comments deeply resonated with me. And I think that there are issues that we are beginning to investigate in the California Acceleration Project that are foundational to improving completion and equity. And that is when you look at a given transfer level course, the variation in success rates across instructors is shocking. It is not uncommon to see success rates that vary between 20 and 90% for the same course at the same college. This is something that faculty are starting to dig into and presented at our last conference, where they're beginning to look at their own personal equity data. They're creating safe spaces for faculty to discuss classroom issues and to look at research around improving pedagogy. But this third issue around faculty mindset, I think, is a really big one that is has the potential to undermine completion and equity. And there was a fascinating study recently done by Mary Murphy and her colleagues at Indiana University that showed that STEM faculty who expressed the belief that intelligence is fixed, that some students don't have what it takes to succeed in STEM, those instructors had significantly lower pass rates, larger equity gaps in pass rates, and student feedback from those instructors indicated that classroom policies and practices were demotivating, unsupportive, and did not promote growth over time. So I think that after we remove the structural barriers, and we need to do that, we need to start the hard work of supporting faculty in safe ways to investigate the classroom level issues that Aisha highlighted.
Thank you, Myra. Those are great efforts. And, we are about to start our time with questions from the audience, but I need to do a last question, if you allow me. So Olga showed us the impressive results from co-requisite models compared to traditional remediation. Even though the vast majority of colleges in the system offer co-requisite models, our research finds that on average, about 1 in 5 first-time math and first-time English students enroll in a co-requisite model in fall 2019. So my question is, how can the use of co-requisite courses be encouraged? What will it take to make sure that any students who could benefit from this model actually enrolls? And in your opinion, should colleges be required to enroll in the co-requisite depending on their high school GPA band? I know this is a lot of questions, but let me start again with Myra this time.
I think we all knew that students don't do optional. So yes, I think colleges should require students with weaker high school performance to enroll in co-requisite support. And we see that colleges like Cuyamaca, College of the Redwoods, Citrus, and others that have relatively high math throughput and equitable or near equitable representation of Blacks and Latinx students in transfer level math completion, these colleges are requiring some students to enroll in co-requisite support. But there is a burden of proof under AB 705 that co-requisite support needs to be beneficial, and it needs to actually help students complete. So colleges working with CAP now are several years in to implementing co-requisites, and we have a pretty good understanding at this point that has developed over time of the features of co-requisite support that improve completion and equity. And these features include backwards design from a transferable course, a structure that engages community and promotes just-in-time support relative to transfer level learning outcomes. In other words, sections that are hard linked with the same instructor, low stakes collaborative practice, attention in both classroom policies and pedagogy to equity-minded practices and the affective side of learning. So any requirement, I think, needs to be bound at least affirmatively in our own commitment to adopting effective practice in the delivery and design of co-requisites.
Thank you, Myra. And really quick, because we are receiving a lot of great questions from the audience. Jeannie, what are your thoughts about this?
So co-requisite support may not be the only solution. It's a great solution. This type of program requires extra time during a single term for students, whether it is in unit load or workload. It is still time, and such time in co-requisite support takes it from something else. Some students have this time, others do not. So less than 10% take 15 or more semester units, while less than a third take 12 or more semester units during any term. Students are making their preferences and bandwidths clear with their enrollment or non-enrollment in the co-requisite courses. It is incumbent upon the faculty, through support from administrators, the Chancellor's office, and educational partners, to find additional effective options that meet the needs of our students. For many students, co-requisite support is key. For other students, especially those that cannot go full-time, other types of learning opportunities and support should be made available, and possibly over multiple terms, so that students can meet their educational goals. I believe requiring co-requisite enrollment alone will not provide the best opportunities for success for students as a whole. Students need options. Co-requisite would be one, prerequisite could be another, but time with a counselor to determine which option best meets the needs of each student's individual life situation is crucial. That's the guided pathways way. In regard to GPA bands, those should not be the sole determination factor. A student's educational background is also crucial. The more measures considered, the better the placement can be.
Thank you, Jeannie. And Aisha, from the Chancellor's office, should colleges require students to enroll in the co-requisite courses?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I will not go as far as saying should require. I think that this report definitely demonstrates to us that this is an effective practice. And so I think from our perspective, part of our work over the next year is really digging into validating the effective implementation of AB 705. So we've just released one of many validation templates that colleges across the system are required to complete, because we have to now start to demonstrate when we allow this window of innovation and experimentation, we now have to demonstrate efficacy, right? And that the ways in which colleges have chosen to implement AB 705 is actually leading to the outcomes that we need for students. I think on the horizon for us, next is this entire bucket of concurrent support, whether it's a co-rec or embedded tutoring or an enhanced course or supplemental instruction. One of the next things we're going to need to evaluate are the different ways that our colleges are implementing some form of concurrent support, so that we can dig into the data and research and understand what is more effective and what is less effective, so that we can then direct practice based on data and research. And what that will demonstrate is most effective. But certainly, I think we clearly see from your report, from the PPIC report, that co-requisites show strong evidence of supporting students' success. And so that's something that I think we would ask our system to pay attention to and to lean into. And then part of our role at the Chancellor's office is how do we start to highlight some of those co-requisite models so that other colleges that have not yet taken that on have a template and a blueprint to follow.
Thank you, Aisha. I completely agree that, moving forward, we need a lot more research and really trying to figure out what works best. Now, let's move to our audience questions. We have received a lot of good questions. Let me read you the first one. This is from a faculty member in a college in the system. If you work at a college that is using techniques that cause more remediation, what are some strategies to convince faculty in charge to have more equitable policies? And you are free to raise your hand, or who wants to take that question first? Myra, thank you.
All right. I have been surprised at how many faculty and other college staff did not really understand the impetus behind AB 705. So they really took and often in an angry state of mind, a compliance mindset around it, and really did not understand much of the findings that you have presented today. So I think a first step is to go back to that. Why are we asking the system? It takes a lot of work to make these changes, and it's because it has phenomenal positive impact on students. And I think that resonates with faculty. I think the second thing they need is, as Aisha said, a blueprint. I don't know how to do it. We haven't done it before. What does it look like? So there needs to be, I think, opportunities for colleges to, a blueprint was a great idea, but to visit when we are able to travel again, colleges that have successfully implemented co-requisite support and that are seeing equitable outcomes in co-requisite support.
Thank you, Myra. And if you guys want to weigh in, or if you want to skip, we can move on with another question, whatever works best. Jeannie.
So I think it would be really good for faculty and students to meet together to have these conversations, for faculty to hear what students are looking for students to be able to hear what faculty are seeing. And then when I'm talking about faculty, I don't just mean math faculty, English faculty, or related discipline faculty. I'm including the counselors in these conversations. It's because together we can do better by our students. And if we bring our students into the conversations, we can hear what they need. They have diverse needs, and I think we need to understand that and respect that and hear from our students.
Thank you, Jeannie.
And I'll just add to that, so because I know we're getting short on time, reflecting on something that Myra said earlier about creating a safe space for faculty to look at the data and to start to interrogate their practices. One thing we have to remember when we're operating in higher education, we hire faculty for their content expertise. All right, and then the training, the professional development varies across the system, but we do not have some sort of unified structure for training college faculty for how to engage in the process of teaching and learning. And so in some ways, I think that's also a future item for us in higher ed, right? That we train brilliant individuals who know their content well, and then we just stick them in the classroom. And so I think there's a lot that we need to do to really support faculty in understanding the teaching and learning process, making sure that faculty have training around diversity, equity, and inclusion. They have training around differentiation. They have training around data-driven decision-making. How do you interrogate your own practice and engage in this continuous cycle of improvement as an educator? So I think we really need to support faculty with those resources, with that training, with that professional development, and creating those spaces where they can engage in that hard work of self-reflection and continuous improvement.
Thank you, Aisha. Another question that we have from the audience is a little more for me or the team is, could you say a little bit more about some of the findings from the 38 administrator interviews in terms of findings, and also any reflections from the panel? So I will say, how we approach our research is, we have our foundation is the data. So, this is evidence-based. We are using data for the 114 colleges, and that's the core of our research. However, we feel like we needed to learn more what was happening, and that's why we are reaching out always in our reports to faculty, administrators, and to learn more and to help us understand those findings. So we hear there were many themes that came up repeatedly across these interviews, about, the strong relationship between access and throughput that the data was showing us, and faculty were saying, if you give students access, they will succeed. Another thing was kind of the importance of co-requisites, like how they were seeing that in their classrooms. How, also we hear, as Olga mentioned in the presentation, kind of there was two views. Some faculty that thought that, they were frustrated because they saw that the more students were failing in their classroom, but they didn't have kind of the entire picture, which is what the beauty of using Throughput, because it makes visible students that before were not visible. So we learned all these things about effective practices in co-requisites, about how colleges are approaching their pedagogy and for being equity minded. But I don't know if you guys have thought, when you read the report, if what you saw as faculty voice was really kind of like consistent with what you heard in your day-to-day kind of interactions. If not, we can continue with the next question. So the next one is, I'm hearing that the co-requisite should be required for students at certain placement levels. If a college data indicates that the co-requisite support is not actually an effective model, should college require the co-requisite if it is not currently required? So who want to take that?
I guess I should start, because I'm the only one of the three who really felt like we need to require support because students don't consistently do optional. Obviously, as I mentioned in my remarks earlier, AB 705 requires that we demonstrate that co-requisite support improves completion. So if that's not happening at your college, I don't think that your only decision is to discontinue it. I think you really need to look at, why is it working elsewhere? And how does the design of your co-requisite differ from the designs that are proving effective across the state with multiple student populations? But again, I think the beautiful thing about AB 705 is it completely focuses on the college demonstrating that things are working for students. And that includes co-requisite support. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Myra. It is. Jeannie, you want to say anything? Or
Sure. I think colleges should examine where co-requisite support is effective and where it's not as effective, examine options. As Aisha had stated earlier, one size fits all may not be what works in our system. And I think we really need to be responsive to the needs of our students and examine what works best for our students.
Aisha, and we're getting to a close to our program. So take this opportunity if you want to do some closing remarks.
No, definitely. Just so toward that issue, and I think in general, I will sort of close it out, building off that question with closing remarks, just about this cycle of continuous inquiry and improvement. I believe that's what this is really about, is us as an educational system of being innovative, being creative, being nimble, right? As opposed to sort of settling into status quo and business as usual. AB 705 really provided an opportunity for us, and an opportunity that I hope across the system we will continue to engage in, of our own choosing, right? I think my caution for the system is, let's not wait for things to be legislated, right? Let's move things forward of our own choosing, and do what we do best as educators. This is what we do, right? Understanding what our students need, trying out new practices, new approaches. For the faculty out there, you do this in your classroom all the time. You test out new things and you see if it works. And some things work and some things don't. And we go back to the drawing board, right? And we reflect on why that particular group assignment didn't quite go the way I thought it was going to go, right? Or why that particular activity seemed to fall flat within the classroom. And we think through it and we innovate and we make improvements and we do it again. And so that's really the work that we're engaged in at a system-wide level, which is no easy task. But what I really want to say to our system, to the California Community College system, is for us, again, I love, this is my word in 2020, given all that we've been dealing with, is to lean in. right? To lean into this opportunity. Let's continue to innovate. Let's research our practices. Let's change our practices if they are not working. And let's do all of that with one core focus, ensuring that our students are successful.
Thank you, Aisha. And that's just, I couldn't have said anything better. That was the best closing remarks. And I want to thank each one of you. I wish we have, another 2 hours to cover more ground. And the exciting thing is we have a year to come. There's going to be a lot more conversation and a lot of more work to be done. So with this, we reached to the end of our program. And again, thank you to our panelists. We leave with important takeaways. Thanks, Olga, for her presentation of the report findings and for her partnership in this research. Many thanks again to our funders. And finally, thanks to all of you for joining us today online. If you pre-register for this event, you will receive a survey later today, and we hope that you will take a couple of minutes to let us know how we did. And please be safe and have a great afternoon. Thank you.